So hello, my name is Dr. Crystal Trebet, and today I am meeting with Joy West for In Our Own Words, the UCI Black Alumni Chapter Oral History Project. Today is Tuesday, August 31st. Welcome, Joy. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. Please introduce yourself with your name and how you would like me to address you and the year that you graduated from UCI.
Good afternoon, Crystal. It's a pleasure to be a part of this project. First of all, you can address me as Joy. That's the easiest. And what was the rest of the question?
And what year did you graduate from UCI?
I graduated from Irvine with the class of 1976.
All right. So Joy, I'm really interested in understanding your path to UCI. So let's get a little bit of background about who you are. Where did you grow up and what was it like?
I grew up in Compton, California. My mom and dad both worked for the LA Unified School District. My dad was a school teacher and my mom was an accountant. I heard of Irvine from my sister because one of her friends went to UC Irvine and she would go up there for something that they call the soul food picnic. So that was my first introduction to Irvine. For me in high school, the school that I wanted to go to for undergrad was Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley. My father looked at me and said, with that Angela Davis poster on your wall, you can go to any school in the University of California system except for Berkeley. So I think I was too radical back then. The times were the middle 70s and a lot had been going on up north. So I ended up going to Irvine because one weekend I was lucky enough to be able to accompany my big sister, probably to her chagrin, for the weekend for the soul food picnic. And I was really impressed that a school was circular and had a park in the middle. It had nothing to do with academics. It had majors. It was like, wow, a circular campus and it has a park in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's how I got to Irvine.
So when you were in high school, did you have a picture of the place you wanted to go and what you wanted to study, or?
Yes, it was in Berkeley.
Yeah. Right, that's right.
I wanted to be political. I wanted to be in the movement. I'm thinking back then what I wanted to study. It was probably some type of something political, because then I was involved in politics. Me and my friends, we go to Compton City Council meetings. So I was always very active in city politics. But I was also, interested in education psychology. So when I got to Irvine, my major was social sciences. And as I recall, and I have to say, as I recall, I was 18 when I started Irvine. I'm 66 now. So it's like, no, why did you go there beyond the circle and the park? I think academically, my interest was either to be a PhD in education or go to law school. But for law school, it was to shape and write legislation. I was not interested in courtroom practice and all that kind of stuff. So that was consistent, I guess, once I got to Irvine, studying social sciences. But the dynamics changed once I got there. And then it became,
what
for
kind
me,
of dynamics?
Being in Irvine back in the 70s, Irvine was not friendly to kids coming in from the inner city in Compton. And it was not unfamiliar to be told that you need to go back to where you came from, why you were there, what are you doing here? We let you in here. And half the time you felt like you were on campus, you were defending your presence. I was even challenged, you're only here because we let you in. And my reminder was, well, actually, I came in through general admissions, regular admissions. I wasn't a part of the EOP program, but all the more reason with attitudes like that, I understand why it exists. It needed to, because people felt like that. So by me coming in regular admission, the difference for me was there were no dorm slots available. So I ended up living off campus. And my dad, being a member of the Methodist Church, found me a room in a very wealthy white family's home in University Park. And that in and of itself, for this girl straight out of Compton, was an interesting experience.
All right, we gotta slow down now because you lived in University Park with a family
The
there.
first year, yes, it was near Culver. Yeah, right off Culver. There was a gas station. There was University Park. It was bikeable to the campus because, and I probably was the only Black person that integrated that neighborhood. And it was felt. I remember my parents dropped me off and I had a bicycle. And I thought, oh, wow, this is cool. I'm going to ride my bike to campus because it was straight up, was that Culver.
Yeah.
And then you pass what's that, University, but then that main street that Irvine's
campus.
On. Campus, yeah. So I figured it was a straight shot. I get to not have a vehicle. I get on my bike and I'm riding through the community. Next thing I know, this woman let her dogs out on me and questioned me, what are you doing here? And I jump off my bike and I'm defending myself from these barking dogs.
Oh my
and
gosh.
She's like, what are you doing here? We'll have none of this in this neighborhood. And I'm like, I'm just trying to ride my bike to get to school. None of what? I mean, what am I doing? And I said, please grab your dogs. So then she got her dogs and she put them on the leash. And no. I'm just like, I don't know what I've done here. So I continued and I was just like, okay, it's going to be an interesting experience. But the thing that happened, I noticed in that the people that I lived with had a younger child. I think she was like 5. And I was always really good with kids. So every evening it was me and all these little kids because they were her friends and they would come by. And I guess I was also a novelty. I mean, how many people have a Black student living in their house? So it was through the kids that the neighbors sort of learned to chill out and weren't as, I don't know the word, aggressive or hostile. I don't know the right word, but they were not very welcoming. But soon it was, oh, you must be Joy. My little kid told me about you and blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of how that worked out. But that only was for my first year. I think the other, which is weird, advantage of that, because it was a lot of learning that you had to do being in that environment. But also what it did from a first year student perspective, it shielded me from the first year dorm nonsense and put me off campus with an older group of students.
Okay.
Most of the students then, at least the Black students, and when I say students, the people I'm talking about are the Black students at Irvine. I don't want to say Irvine was segregated because it wasn't, but it was naturally segregated. We had our clubs in the BSU and we built our community because that's literally all we had. And you didn't even have to know somebody, but you saw them, okay, a Black person, you're in the group. But that's sort of how, but by me being off campus, I fell in with the off-campus Black students who are the graduate students, the students in their, I shouldn't say this, but 5th year, trying to get out their 3rd year. So by then we're a little bit more serious about their studies and things like that. So with that, it put me on a different, I think, academic track. Not saying I didn't party and do that, but I think that dynamic is very different when you're on campus versus off campus.
So this was, you said this was your first year by the
first year.
And so there were other students that were living off campus, tended to be
mainly students that were, I'd say, 2nd, 3rd year and graduate.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot lived in Verano and some lived in off-campus apartments, but it just puts you with a different group of people when you're not living in Lago.
Right.
And at the time, Middle Earth was being constructed. And by my second year, I was one of the first inhabitants to Middle Earth.
And what year
And
was that?
participated in the naming of it. Let me see, I got there, let me see, I graduated in high school, 73, so 73, 74. It was 74, 75 school year that Middle Earth opened. And I was one of the first inhabitants of Mirkwood. I didn't vote for the name Middle Earth because I thought it was hokey and I didn't read the book, but it was Middle Earth, and it was named after Hobbiton and all the little things. Right. But Mirkwood was the forest.
Yeah, you mentioned that there had been people who were questioning what you were doing at UCI. Was this other students or they were other
white students? Like, we let you in here. What are you doing here? I mean, it's almost like, I'm not trying. And then this, I don't want to bring up a bad, but it's almost like that Trump notion of we let you here, you need to go back. It's that same. So when I saw it resurface when he came, I'm like, oh, I'm trained for this. This is what I learned at Irvine. Oh my God, the mentality has not changed. But it was that community when you left campus. Back then, I get pulled over. And you ask for your ID, you give them your ID, and they look at it and they go, this isn't Compton, what are you doing here? And I got my little rap together. It happens so often. Sir, you have to say, sir, I'm a student at the University of California, sir. Here is my identification, sir. Here is my driver's license and my student ID. Why are you stopping me, sir? And it almost became a song, and your hands were visible. And you sat there and they filled out a little green card. And then they told you to be on your way.
And that was in Irvine.
Once you cross into that Orange County line, you were in that circle. But then again, when I looked at my parameters at Irvine, my boundaries, they weren't very long. When you look at the school, I mean, we were kids, we didn't have any money. So we were going anywhere to do anything. So it was literally, when we left campus, you'd leave to go to somebody's house. Remember that something called, what was it, South Coast Plaza?
Yeah, there's still a South Coast Plaza.
Okay, well, there were apartments in that area. So a lot of students lived in that area. So literally the distance from Irvine to South Coast Plaza, if you looked at that as your parameter, because there was no reason to go into Santa Ana. You didn't have any business. I mean, you really stuck close to your parameter. Because it was not safe to leave. I mean, you just like, okay, you already explained why I'm at Irvine now. If I'm over here, I don't have an explanation. So I need to stay in the campus proximity. So, but that's how, I mean, my first year was off campus with the family. Second year was Mirkwood on the dorm, Middle Earth. And my third year, me and some friends, we rented a house on Newport Beach on the peninsula, a duplex. And of course, everyone who came to visit us got stopped, pulled over, what are you doing here? And they fill out the little green card. And so it became a routine. And one day I'm gonna find out what was the deal with those green cards and what happened to them. And that's your story there. They're probably the university. But also, I hate to say this with Irvine, school did not protect us. And they were like talking to deaf ears. So that's why we had to be strong in our own community. So a lot of it, if you probably talk to them, it'd be like they knew nothing about it. It's like, yeah, because you didn't hear us. So what would we go to you for? Who would
you try to talk to about your situation? Who are you approaching and what would you say?
I don't know. When I think back about it, that's hard to say because I really don't remember the school infrastructure. I mean, I just remember the experience. Like when I think of Irvine, it's almost like when you think of Irvine, what comes to your mind? Getting stopped in the BSU. It was probably all kind of stuff going on outside of those things. But those were the things that, I mean, it's weird. I don't have a reason to go to Orange County or whatever when I'm home, and I come to California regularly. But I found myself, it was really weird, even years later, when me and Tam came down to Irvine for something. Now, as soon as I hit that
Tam
Orange County line, Tam Boozy Carroll, the minute I hit the line, I braced up. I said, oh, Tam, this is bad. I said, man, we're in 2000 something. And why do I brace up when I pass the Orange County line? I said, that's like a PTSD thing.
Yeah.
But that was a reality of being in that area. I mean, I can't say Irvine did it. I mean, so whoever the people were that decided to cite Irvine in the middle of the most racist part of the state, perhaps they should look at why would you place a university in a location where you knew Black students weren't welcome? And then you didn't even, I think did you tell me somebody said Black students weren't even admitted the first few years that Irvine was open, and that's why part of this history project is going on, because they know
there was one.
Huh?
There was maybe one.
One, okay, good for that one. I feel sorry for them, whoever they were, but yeah, but that's the reality. I think things are probably really different now. I'm sure they are, but during the time window that I was there, that's what it was about. But and that's not a complaint. That's just how it was. Yeah. But we made our own community. We within our community, we thrived. We had our own little basketball team. We had our.
Tell me about your community. I mean, what and you mentioned that it was through the community
BSU
that you thrived. So that's the Black Student Union.
The Black Student Union. We did the Soul Food Picnic, and that's when we invited everyone statewide from the different schools to come down and join with us and it may sound traditional or crazy, but our fried chicken and greens and traditional things that we'd have, like potato salad and cornbread, just college kids. I remember, the day before preparing, that's community. We all on the string bean team, or you're on this team picking string beans or shucking corn or frying up the chicken, or arguing about something, because at some point it's going to be something. Hey, you know about too many string beans? But that was part of the community, pulling the lunch together. I think one of the most beautiful things was the year that Kool and the Gang and Jungle Boogie. It was hot. Jungle Boogie, they were the hottest group rolling. We got Irvine. And then we had to convince them. We said, no, really, really give us the money. People will come to hear Kool and the Gang. We had to convince them to give us money to hear Kool and the Gang. We had our people, our peeps, coming down from San Francisco. All the UCs came to the Soul Food Picnic that year. We had the concert, Kool and the Gang, in the basketball, that little basketball gymnasium thing.
Was that over by Crawford Hall, or
I don't know the names, whatever that little place where they gave away cars to make people come look at that little tired basketball, because when nothing happened at Irvine, they had to give away a 240Z for people to come to a basketball game. Okay. That's stuff they don't tell you. That's how boring Irvine would know. But nobody would come, so those were the incentives. But anyway, we kept begging them. We said, believe me, we don't have to give away a car for this event. Give us some money. We can bring Kool and the Gang down. It's gonna be live. They gave us the money. We brought Kool and the Gang down. Once the BSU made our money from the ticket sales, we said, hey, at that point, it just became fire code issue. We opened up the door, and anyone that wanted to go to the concert could go, as long as it met fire code. So that's the kind. It wasn't about making money then. We said, hey, we done made our money, open the doors, let everybody, as we said then, all the brothers and sisters that came all the way around, probably gonna get stopped trying to get up out of here, and we hope nobody gets arrested, to come to see Kool and the Gang. And that was one of the best memories for me at Irvine, because first of all, the administration said that there was no way that we could pull that off. And we pulled it off. And then they had never seen that little tired basketball gym at full capacity. And we cleaned it up after the event. That's another thing. We all had our little mops and brooms. And after the event, we cleaned up. I remember I was on the bleacher detail. See, we're very organized. I was on the bleacher detail. So I had my little broom, and part of my job was clean up one of the quadrants under the bleachers. So when we left, the place was in top order. So those are the kind of things we did. When people had issues, we'd all get together and join them for whatever their issue might have been with the campus or academics. And it was basically support. That's the type of things, support and gatherings. So we laughed. We always teased that if they want to gather us all and just take us away, all they'd have to do is go to the park at noon on any given day, because we'd all gather at the park at noon, have lunch, have our little social.
And this was in Aldrich Park.
Huh?
You'd gather
Is
in
that what they
Aldrich Park
called it? Yeah, the little park.
or campus park.
Remember the circle? But I don't
Yeah,
know what they call
it's
it now, but it
it's
was
it's Aldrich Park now.
okay.
I think
Yeah, it was
where
that
his
little. It's probably outgrown. It's probably a forest now, but it was
no,
just
they keep it pretty well groomed.
I mean, but it's probably big. I mean, when you think about it, 40, I mean, 40, 50 years ago, probably itty bitty trees where they're now big. So it was, it's just a little park. But that we laughed because we said if somebody were observing us, all they'd have to do is literally go to the top of the administration building around 11:30 and do this. And then they just see us all coming from all corners. We gather at the park, socialize, whatever, and then we'd all around after lunch, we'd all even go back to our respective places.
So you had the soulful picnic that was
Soul food picnic.
soul food picnic that was in this spring or
It happened every year.
every year.
Every year was a soul food picnic. What made it special that year was Cool in the Gang.
Do you recall the year?
Well, I said it was 70. Well, I was only at Irvine between academic year 74, 75, because I graduated in 76. So I'm thinking it was not the summer of 76, it's the summer of 75 or the summer of 74.
And you met in the park for lunch and
Oh,
gathered.
that was every day for 3 years. I mean, we just kind of gathered there. That was just a little gathering spot.
Were there other things that that the community would put together or do regularly?
I don't remember. I'm sure we had a lengthy political agenda, but as years go by, I don't remember what it was. I remember academically teaming up with Ron, who was one of the upperclassmen working on his PhD, Hudson.
Ron Hudson?
Ronald Hudson. He's deceased now and he got his PhD. He did get his doctorate from Irvine. And I remember we did, because I remember Dr. Joseph White. Mm-hmm. I studied under him and did independent studies under him about Black psychology and child education. Well, one thing we did, because I noticed Ron, I'm like, Ron, wait a minute. I came up in public schools in Compton. And I'm looking at these public schools here in Irvine. And last I checked, it's the same public dollars. So I'm trying to feel, why is there such a difference in the infrastructure, the raggedy books we got, the new books the other kids got? So Ron and I, we literally at the time, the university had a video department. So they equipped us with video. I still have the tape that we made. I just don't have the size thing to watch it. But we literally compared schools throughout LA County and schools throughout Orange County, Newport Beach, Irvine, in particular Newport Beach and Irvine, to show the distinction in education systems. Mm-hmm. And you're looking at the same tax base, statewide, federal. So I don't remember what my findings were, but I do remember the topic of my thesis was the miseducation of the Black child.
Okay.
So I think my findings were showing disparities in systems. That's another reason why, for my choice in wanting to go to law school, I chose to leave the great state of California, which was purported to have the best schools nationwide for everything. And that may have been true back then. But the problem was at Irvine, I really felt like this. I'm like, dang, if they feel like this in undergrad, I don't know that I want to be in a professional school with white students because it was hostile. And to me, it was hostile to my learning. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I consciously decided, and I heard about that there was this Black school back east called Howard. Yeah. And Howard had a law school that Thurgood Marshall went to. So that's why I applied to Howard and ended up going there. And it was mainly based on a racial stuff. I think maybe had my racial experience been different in Irvine, Howard, it wouldn't have been a thought, but it was every day I felt conscious
I see.
of race. I mean, you couldn't help it. We weren't trying. I mean, I didn't pull myself over. I didn't tell me to go back to where I came from. I mean, it was just, and I remember my first day in sociology when the professor, oh my God, he came out. Now, mind you, I grew up in Compton. My mother's mother lived on 104th Street, which was considered Watts. The riots were on 103rd Street. Okay. I remember my first sociology class, the professor coming in and his topic, we're going to discuss why barbarians in Watts riot. And I'm sitting there and I looked around the class and there was this other woman who was biracial. And then there was this white woman who I would say was not economic. So she was more a poor white woman. The three of our eyes connected. Mm-hmm. And those became, matter of fact, to this day, one of the ladies is my best friend and probably one of the only friends I kept in touch with at Irvine. The other woman, I'm not sure what happened to her.
What's their names?
Josepha James. She graduated class of 1976. The other woman's name was Tanya. I don't remember Tanya's last name, and I don't remember where she was from. But when we both, Josepha and I, matter of fact, I ended up graduating in the class of 76. I took double units and everything to get out of Irvine because I'm like, I got to get out of here. But I have to graduate. I just can't leave, and go home. Well, I got, because it's racial. My dad I couldn't see me forming my lips and saying, Dad, I need to transfer because they're not racially doing things right. My dad would look at me and say, excuse me, my parents back then didn't play that. They sent you to school, you went to school and you went to school and you graduated. So my deal was, then you take double units, you get permission to take over units and get out of here. And that's what I did. So I ended up graduating with the class of 76, whereas when I came in, my class would have been 77.
So it felt hostile even in the classroom.
That particular classroom. Now I had other classrooms. Now another one, a different thing was like Carol Murmy. And as it turned out, she was a professor and taught women in society. Yeah. So that was an interesting perspective as well. So with that class, found myself among a bunch of white feminists. So every Saturday as part of the work class, I had to be in this white feminist group. And then I remember the paper I wrote at the end of that class. And the name of my paper is Why Black Women Aren't in the White Women's Movement. Because to me, it was, I'm like, honey, I ain't never been on no pedestal trying to get off. Okay. I wish somebody would go to work so I can keep my butt at home and watch the kids. Hello. This may sound crazy and nothing wrong, but it was a completely different dynamic as a Black woman and a white woman. I share your pain and oppression and all that stuff, but girlfriend, we really don't have the same issues, kind of, in a sense. And I also notice how they can kind of jump in and out of issues based on my color. I could never jump in and out of issues. I'm a Black woman. So on the one end, you can be white and rah, rah, rah for the movement. But then the next minute you can put on your red hat and be just as racist as the person next door when it's convenient and not be noticeable. So that's what I learned. And the funniest thing with Carol, and she was a professor there. She was from, I think, originally from Minneapolis. As it turns out, a few years ago, and I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm very politically active here. And I don't know what made me read the email list. And I saw this name, Carol Murmy. Carol Murmy. And I wrote this woman, and I'm like, by chance, are you the Carol Murmy that was a professor at Irvine? Did he have? Like, yeah. So I'm Joy. I'm like, Carol. As it turns out, Carol lives maybe 5 minutes from here, where I live today. I remember we got together. It was kind of funny. Now, this is a woman who led the feminist class and all that. Carol ends up marrying some hotshot big professor who teaches at the University of Maryland and kind of lives a life as a yoga teacher and all that stuff. She had a couple of kids. I'm like, oh, you got a couple of kids, you know, what are they doing? And then she told me where her daughter lived. And I go, nice. But I had to laugh. I said, now ain't this a kick? Like, again, back to that woman in society. That's exactly what I said. Back in the 70s, y'all were saying all this stuff. But at the same time, you ended up marrying some hotshot rich guy that allowed you to live the life. And you didn't have to be a teacher no more. And you could be a yoga professor. Not saying there's anything wrong teaching yoga, because you're doing what you do. But then when I looked at where her kid lives in a neighborhood that is very gentrified now. So on a different end, my experience when I drive through DC, it's like, gentrification, doggone it, they don't. And we start tracking, Lord, they're Logan, child, they're up to our street now. Girl, they're at D Street, child, and that's how we're watching losing our neighborhoods. And then all of a sudden, what used to be a Black community is now white. But all of a sudden, with that whiteness comes the Starbucks, the police protection, the streets are paved, there's more libraries, there are new books in the schools. If that makes sense to you.
Yes.
So I think my other experience, when I participated a few months ago, the class of 1976 had a reunion, and I was asked to be on the reunion committee. And I agreed. I guess they caught me on a good day. Oh, okay, I'll be. And so I find myself on this reunion committee. I'm like, oh, Joy, this is going to be interesting. Irvine reunion. And then it was me. And again, I'm only Black person on this reunion team. And so, and when it got to their stories of Irvine, and I'm sitting there, all I could say was hostile, BSU, whatever. But I'm listening to their stories. And I'm just listening. And I'm like, wow, all that was going on in Irvine? Wow, y'all was doing all that? And then she mentioned this place where they all go and drink beer and have fun and so. And I'm thinking, see, we couldn't do that. Because see, if we went to a place like that and drank like that, all of us would be in jail trying to get back to school because we would have gotten stopped somewhere for a DUI. So we had to live a little differently and do things more. Not that we weren't doing things, but we had to be a little, like I say, where's the statute of limitations? More discreet.
Okay.
But I also learned listening to these people, they weren't discreet. They were just straight up just doing stuff and hanging out, and the places that I heard of that, I mean, like, wow. It was like, all I can say, it was that two different worlds existed at Irvine. Two completely different worlds existed. But I think now, when I look back, it becomes enriching because the one thing, and this may sound really strange, but the one thing I can say is, you know what? I hold my head up high. I went to the University of California, Irvine. I am a Black student from Compton, California. I was accepted into general admissions. I graduated in 3 years with a 3.87 average that enabled me to go to law school. And I competed successfully academically with white peers who came from schools that were far better equipped than mine coming out of Compton. That's one thing I learned too. I learned more about my deficiencies in the education system growing up. Because I remember when we went to Newport Beach High School, we were in a science lab. And this, I always tease about this. I'm like, you know, they all had their own frog. We had one frog and we were all teamed up dissecting the frog. What's up with that? Why don't we have our own frogs? I mean, really, state money? In my school, why is there one frog per 5 kids? Where at the white school, there's one frog per kid. Learning, that child is able to learn better when you got your own frog to cut up and you're not team cutting a frog. You know what I mean? Not the frog cutting stuff. I mean, but you understand my example.
Yes.
I also noticed they had piped in music and beanbag chairs, student lounge. I'm like, whoa, hold up. They have piped in music and beanbag chairs? We lucky if we got benches, and the only thing we hearing through the speaker is Rep. Mr. Wade when he's telling us what time we need to do something. So again, when I looked at the learning environment were completely different, I'm like, wow, it's almost like ours are pre-prison and theirs were pre-Irvine. I mean, if that makes sense to you, and but that's not an Irvine thing. That's when we start looking at systemic and structural and things like that. When the discussion now through 66-year-old eyes, that 18 to 21, because I was at Irvine from 18 to 21, that experience from 18 to 21 kicks in, that memory kicks in to an older eyes that can understand it better and go like, wow. So when I see it again, I immediately recognize what I'm looking at. Immediately. I don't have an answer maybe to address it, but at least for constructive conversation purposes, you know what you're looking at, and also you know what you're equipped for, what you're good enough for, because that's another thing too. I think academically speaking, coming from an HBCU, people would tend to look at HBCU down or negative. It's not as good as, or it's not as whatever. But I can say it was funny too, going to Howard, going to law school at Howard, talking to one of my friends who went to the University of Virginia for law school. And I said, yeah, I know they made us cross the burning sands. I mean, we were nuts. And maybe that's why Black students had more difficulty with the bar, because we weren't spoon-fed the bar. We were taught the law. So that's why I say, hands down, at the end of the day, if you give me a choice, if I have to go to court, I would prefer having a Howard-trained lawyer, because their training was different than being just academically fed something. And that's my impression in going to a Black university. The core of your education experience is different, because it's just a different presumption. Right now, you don't get the same presumption. So,
I mean, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your academic world at UCI. You mentioned Dr. White, working under Dr. White, and the impact that he had on your research. And, you know, were there other individuals who really had an effect on your academic life there, or even your academic trajectory?
It's called remembering Bob Newcomb. I remember Professor Newcomb, Bob Newcomb. He ran a dorm class, he and his wife. And I took the dorm, I think her name was Betty Newcomb. I think they were Bob and Betty Newcomb. They may both be deceased now, but he was on faculty then. And I think that was part of social sciences. The other professor I would remember would be, again, Carol Murmy. But I think Joe White was, I really don't remember the other professors. I remember kind of classes. I remember having the challenge of physical science I remember an experience. I remember, and this teacher, maybe I should have remembered his name, because he gave me a life lesson. I was not doing good because I had been fooling around with statistics. What was that? Statistics. A, B, and C are 1, 2, 3 that we had to take, right? And I remember I went in to talk to him right before the exam. And I said, I know I'm not doing good and everything, but do you think it's, possible that I could pass this class? And that's when he taught me, yes, it's possible, but it's not probable. And that's when I learned probability and statistics is possible, but it's not probable. Now, what does that mean? And at that point, he told me something about getting a tutor. And I remember I got a tutor, And I was so proud when I went from a D, because I was embarrassed, and then to have to take home a D when your father's a teacher, taking home a D when he's paying for your tuition, because the only reason you got your D is because you were playing around. In his mind, you could never convince daddy it was because it was academically over your head. So I pulled that D up to a B because of a tutor. But even more so, it taught me what it means to learn something and understand it versus memorizing something. Mm-hmm. And that's what I said, I don't remember that professor's name. And I use that as an example today when I'm talking to law students, when they're getting ready to take the bar exam and they're not confident. And I said, did you memorize it or did you learn it? I said, if you learn it, you know it. And that's like, say you're sitting at Irvine. That's like me asking Crystal, Crystal, how can I get from Irvine to LA? Which way you want to go? You want to go up to 405, you want to go up to 1, or you want to go up all the way to 5? Because you know it. Had you memorized it, okay, and that's my point. And I think that's what probability and statistics taught me. Mm-hmm. Carol Murmy in the women's thing class, again, taught me about roles of women in society, but more particular distinction in women and how we look. And our issues can be different. Not that we don't have commonalities, but there are things that require different solutions. Everything is not one shoe fits all. Okay. Joe White. Oh my God. What did I not learn from Joe White? I quote Joe White every time I get the opportunity with one phrase Joe White taught us. Only a fool goes by the rules when the crowd don't play fair. That's a powerful statement. And you can take it and extract it any way you want to. And look at what any rule structure or circumstance. And once you understand that, those kind of principles of life can help you think through scenarios that are like, let's look at this a little differently now. Not breaking the rule, but am I following a construct that's there just in mind? Or when everybody else is doing this and then I'm being held to this standard? Or do I question those standards within the bounds? Another person who was very fundamental was a woman by the name of Carolyn Bolden, Dr. Carolyn Bolden. She was in the Department of Education. I met Carolyn I think by just being on that floor, working on by being a social science major and having to come in. She seen me bouncing in and out. One day called me into her office and said, young lady, I see you bouncing in and out a lot. Would you like a job? Yeah. So I ended up getting some internship in the Office of Social Sciences. And I think Bob Newcomb had recommended me. I can't remember who recommended who to what. But to this day, Carolyn Bolden is like my play mom. She lives in Irvine. No, she lives in Long Beach now. Her kids are grown up. I used to babysit them. That was the exchange. So I come over. And then, it's like, it takes a student, right? When you show up at Carolyn's house around dinner time, every night. No. And so I started showing up around dinner time. Hey, Carol, how you doing? Oh, sure, I'll babysit the kid. Good, what are we having for dinner tonight? And so I just made myself a part of that household. And then next thing you know, I became part of the family. And I think she was also one of the ones that told me about Black schools. There was a school called Howard back in DC I might want to think about.
And was she Black or no?
She was Black.
She was Black.
And she was in the Office of, the Office of Education. Remember back in the day, I don't know how the school is situated now, but in the social sciences building, the Office of Education was on the same floor as Social Sciences Administration. So that's how, and I think it was with that Office of Education that I had that internship. So that's how I met, or somehow like that. Yeah.
What would you say was your, fondest memory of UCI?
Fondest memory?
Mm-hmm.
Soul food picnic in the Cool in the Gang contest. And playing on the promotion basketball team because I like playing basketball. So of course the BSU.
Which basketball team was this?
Pomosia. That was the BSU team in the
Okay.
intramural. They had intramural basketball at Irvine then. So one of the intramural teams, of course, the BSU team, we had 3 teams: Pomosia A, Pomosia B, and Pomosia C. And the A was the men's A team. I think it was the men's B team. We had the women's team, which might have been Pomosia C, and then the co-ed team. But we all had the name Pomosia. So either Pomosia A, B, C, or D, something like that. Yeah, I still have my little Pomosia socks. That's probably the only thing I have from everybody. They're red, black, and green. They're red, black, and green at the top. Yeah, they're red, black, and green and white, sweat socks, but they're red, black, and green at the top. Yeah. So that was a fond memory, playing intramural basketball. But my main memory is the BSU and the Soul Food Picnic, and in particular, that banner year with Cool in the Gang.
Were you there when they had the ghetto, which was like a night?
Oh yeah, they party over at Lago. Yeah, Lago, that was the ghetto.
So another okay. So can you tell me a little bit about it?
When they party at that would be the ghetto. Yeah, that was a party over at Lago.
Lago was a dorm, or
that was the dorms. The dorm, Lago, what's it called? Lago Court, Mesa Courts.
Mesa Court.
And Lago was one of the dorms over Mesa Courts.
And so they would have dorm parties. And
yeah,
that's what it was called, the ghetto.
The ghetto. The ghetto.
Another alum was talking a little bit about the parties at the ghetto.
The ghetto.
And that they were rather regular.
Yeah, that's what I said. That was our community. We didn't go to nightclubs. We didn't go to things like that. We partied within our own. And like I said, Lago was always something was always happening. And I'm trying to think too, was a ghetto at the student center? I'm pretty sure the ghetto was in Lago. That was one of the residents. I'm just, forgetting the location, but it was on campus.
It was on campus.
It wasn't nowhere off campus.
And was it just UCI students, or were there other?
Mainly Blacks from Irvine. For real, who's gonna come out to Irvine and stop going through all that stuff? For really, the only time you could convince somebody to come would be during Soul Food Picnic.
You mentioned that others were coming.
During times, people weren't coming out to Irvine. Nobody gonna go to Orange County. I'm not sure who go to Orange County, child, please.
You never know. As you mentioned, people were coming for the picnic and from other colleges, right?
Yeah, but that was for the Soul Food Picnic.
Gotcha.
And Gang, okay.
Okay.
That was a special event.
We
weren't special, that was just, I'm sure. Matter of fact, one of my friends from law school, she went to Santa Cruz. And I said, well, did you come down with Sunday? Who's going down to Irvine? I'm like, all right, don't go there now, okay?
We've covered a lot of your memories, but I wonder is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered so far?
A couple of things happened at Irvine while we were there. The Planet of the Apes, streakers. Remember the streakers? You guys, they didn't sit down and talk about that whole group of streakers that one of the professors organized. Saying, don't talk about that.
No, what happened?
Those nude white kids running through campus, nude in the line with no clothes on. You never heard of the streakers?
Not at UCI necessarily.
They came to Irvine. There was a streaking day sanctioned at Irvine.
Okay.
And they came through en masse. And it looks like that background you have, is that near where that Gateway Commons is?
Yes.
Okay. I remember the statute of limitations is passed. It's been how many years? All right. BSU, we were ready for them because it was kind of offensive. It's like, wait a minute, these white kids run around campus nude. Had that been us, we'd be arrested. The school, we'd be suspended, we'd be arrested. So we were waiting for them as they came around the finish line, and we had paint. Streak with this. Well, I guess we were trying to cover them up and paint them so they would be colorful runners. But yes, we greeted them with paint.
So was that something that happened every year or just?
I think it was just that fad that was some nationwide fad. I think if you probably Google streaking, and in that year, if I was at Irvine from 73 to 76, probably around 74, 75. There's a whole mass. And I remember too on campus, it was maybe around 75, one of the professors organized a group of street, and we were very offended by that. I mean, like, we're fighting to get cool in the gang down here. They organized but run butt naked on campus. I mean, it was just, we didn't think that was cute, but it was a fad, and they did it. Mm-hmm. We always thought if we did something like that, we would all be arrested, and we just felt that way. But one memory was we must mention there was Officer Duncan.
Okay.
That was a police officer who was on campus. And he was really cool because he'd only stop you at where the little stop thing was and show your ID, and you were cool, and he let you go on. But yeah, there was Officer Duncan on campus.
Just the one, he was tasked
I think he was part of the campus police.
Okay.
He probably rolled through that little stop sign.
Was it just his task to check ID?
Well, you know how they have, I guess, campus police.
Okay.
I guess everybody has to make sure, campus police to, I guess to keep the students safe. So, but we got stopped a lot, but Officer Duncan wouldn't harass us. He just, okay, you're cool, go on. Okay, as long as you're a student, yeah. But mainly his thing was rolling stops and those silly things like that, yeah.
And then you said you were there for Planet of the Apes?
Planet of the Apes, I believe, was filmed. They filmed Planet of the Apes at Irvine because of its unique building structure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that made it so. And then two is, I remember when they showed us, they did a screening. That's what they did too. I think they did a screening of Planet of the Apes when we were there, so students were able to see the screening. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So if I were to ask you, how did you survive and thrive at UCI, what would you say?
How did I survive and thrive?
Yeah.
You survive and thrive because you were born equipped to survive and thrive. I had no choice. My goal was to come there and get my BA degree, and from there go on to either be a doctor or attorney, depending on what institution accepted me first. Mm-hmm. So in terms of dealing with what comes to being interracial Orange County, I grew up in Compton. So every time you left Compton, you went to Hollywood, what you doing here? Or you accepted to get stopped, what you doing here? Just profile, you grew up with profile crap. I guess growing up in Compton, they tell you grew up violent and all that stuff, and you come from single family, all this stuff they tell you about your city. But like I tell people, well, all the kids I was in school with had a mommy and daddy, and they lived in a house and went to work every day. And they sent their kids to school, and a lot of us went on to college. So when I got to college, my role was to finish. Mm-hmm. And finish. And I did. I finished in 3 years. When I look at the expense, it was $200 a quarter. So my entire tab would have been $600 a year. My first year was paid for with a Red Cross scholarship for $1,000 because I was a Red Cross volunteering on the board of directors. LA Red Cross, got to throw that in for the Red Cross. But the other 2 years, and then the dorm, that 1 year, and then rent the third year. I don't know what it's like living in Irvine now, but the experience being there was profound. Mm-hmm. It did say little Black kids coming from Compton can compete. I learned my deficiencies. I was very deficient coming there. To me, I remember talking to people and I was very self-conscious. And I remember it was the same Carol Mermaid. And she asked, what do you want to do? I said, well, first of all, I need to be articulate. And she looked at me, she said, articulate? I said, yes, I need to be articulate. Because when I'm talking to you people, I don't sound right. It was almost like that was the first learning code switching. There are two different languages coming from places. So in the Irvine community, but at the same time, when I go back home in certain areas, I'm not going to sound like I may sound when I'm in an academic environment at Irvine. So it was those things that by the time I got out of there, 3 years later, my speech had changed. The way my thought processes had changed. My viewpoints have broadened. A lot, my confidence probably was raised because you grow up, they telling you this. And I'm like, wait a minute, if I can go to Irvine and compete with these rich people's dumbass kids, excuse me, with these rich people's kids and are smarter than them, I will never get that benefit of the doubt, because that's also when I learned we always have to be a little bit 5 times. But when I could sit and Scott Chapman, if he's listening, so yes, Scott, I grew up to be a lawyer and I'm still a lawyer and I'm licensed in 2 states. Scott was the one saying, we let you in here. And I said, no, Scott, the only reason why you're there is because your mama did the dean, because you about as dumb as anybody I have ever seen. Okay. And I meant it. So I'm not saying Irvine, that's how y'all letting your other kids in there, because that's not true. But when people throw those things out there, that's an indictment on a person. Okay. So Irvine taught me how to withstand those kind of indictments and stand up for myself and be proud, because I can look in my eye and say, no, baby, I stood out with you and I came through your institution and got mine. Is hanging on my wall upstairs with a little gold seal on it. So that my Irvine experience. Yeah.
And, you just talked a little bit about what you took away from your experience at UCI. Can you tell me a little bit more about, what you are doing today, your time after UCI, your career, and how your life has been shaping up post?
Well, after Irvine, I did go to Howard. I became a lawyer. I'm licensed in the District of Columbia in the state of Michigan. I was interested in national politics. I've served as the chief lobbyist for the cities of Detroit, New Orleans, and Oakland under Lionel Wilson back in the 80s, and was their Washington representative, have legislation that I pushed through Congress. I think, and when you look at an Irvine tie, one of my weekend activities at Irvine was with the Cesar Chavez movement and boycotting because of the treatment of farm workers. And as it turned out, my first job out of law school was with the Migrant Legal Action Program, which was the think tank for legal services for migrants. And my area, because of my interest in education, was migrant ed. And one of the pieces of legislation that I pushed through gave statutory authorization to the HEP and CAMP program, which is the high school equivalence program, and the college assistant migrant program, which is still on the books, and maybe a camp office at Irvine. But basically I know there's one at Cal State Dominguez Hills, but the whole purpose of the HEP program, it allowed the children's education records to follow them, because that was one thing they were never able to get a elementary degree or a secondary degree because their records, they didn't have school records, even though they go to school here, go to school there. But what that legislation did was make sure those records followed them, and they were able to graduate from high school. It was the most gratifying. Matter of fact, when the legislation, I recall that the other day, I was telling a cousin, I remember driving to see out somewhere, because I had my little green Volkswagen that I drove at Irvine, and I always had a little nail in the tire, and I'd stop everywhere and fill it up. So it made too much sense to go get a new tire, right? You always broke. But I remember driving out somewhere in Virginia, and the excitement as the president's plane landed, and to see Jimmy Carter get off the plane and the Secretary of Education and all those muckety mucks and me standing in line and shaking his hand as he signed. It was the Education Act of 1981, and my legislative provisions were in there. And that really did take me back to a moment at Irvine. I said, wow, Joy, just think about it. You know, back in the day in Irvine, again, statute of limitations, at the with the grape people on with Shaz. My duty was I was on the grape detail. So when we go into the store, we kind of pinch a grape, and then people wouldn't buy the grapes because the grape was pinched. And that way we impacted their economics. So I was a grape pincher. And like I said,
was that in Irvine grocery stores?
Yeah, there are people buy grapes, right?
Yes.
And you're gonna buy some grapes. You're not gonna buy no damaged grapes, are you?
No. You don't want those.
Those.
So your approach was to stop the selling of those grapes.
Yeah, so we pinched a grape.
Was that part of your work with the
farm worker movement?
Yeah, the farm worker movement.
Yes, farm worker movement. Our probably group maybe took it to extreme. We're supposed to be out front, but who knows? You know, but I'm the student. My little job is going there. And now that I'm thinking about it, they probably offered us little dummies. It's like, yeah, somebody gets in trouble for vandalizing the store, be little dumb kids. No, but anyway, no, but the whole issue back then was farm worker conditions and the I'm back at my farm, but the squalid and inhumane conditions and treatment. And when you look at that Orange County, you remember all them, I don't know if those grapevines are still there. The Irvine was nothing once you left that campus. It's all built up now. But for those who were back there in the day on Jabuku Canyon, was nothing but that little road. There's nothing but grapevines, nothing but agriculture there. So for me to finish Irvine, get my law degree, and then my first job was representing migrant and seasonal farm workers. That was like, okay. But that came to me from being at Irvine. That didn't come from Howard. My legislative skills came from Howard, but that humanity in that movement definitely was grounded at Irvine. So yeah, and beyond, let me see, I opened my own, I'm a lawyer, so I opened my own office in 1987. It's still downtown on Connecticut Avenue. Now it's like, you gotta go to the office? So now that we can Zoom and do all this stuff, I can sit in and then say, why are you paying all that rent? I'm like, because you're stupid. But anyway, no. But I've decided maybe, and every year now I'm incorporated. Do I extend my incorporation? So now I'm at 66 years old, where you're in the wind down part, and the pick me up in my wind down part is my camera. So now I'm very active with Montgomery County, Maryland. I'm on the board of their Sister Cities program, which is about diversity. I've traveled extensively with them. I've also been to all 7 continents, including Antarctica. So since leaving Irvine, I have seen the world. I always believed in, you're not going to tell me how it is. I got to see for myself and make my own judgments. So that's sort of, how I tended to live my life. I guess after being in Irvine, surviving that, I wasn't afraid to get on a plane by myself and go anywhere. That's one thing Irvine equipped for you. I mean, if you can handle them troopers and being on them back streets at Irvine, and you're equipped for life. You go, oh boy, we're gonna do some editing on this interview.
If you if you were to talk to current or prospective students now and offer them words of encouragement or advice, what would you tell them?
I would say, while you were at the University of California, Irvine, you use that time because you learn everything you can. You study, you learn, you question. You do what Dr. Joe White said, only a fool go by the rule when the crowd don't favor. But first, you got to know what the rules are. You have to understand the rules, how they apply, how they don't apply, and then you start doing the variants. But the one thing I can say about the University of California systemically, it is still top-notch. When you come out of there, you have an education. You're competitive with the world. Also, I don't know what the Irvine environment is these days. I understand it's a lot different. When I was there, it was hostile to people who look like me. But if that environment has changed, I say I pat myself on the back because it's changed, because it's on our backs that change happened, because we were the first ones there that went through that gook at Irvine and went through whatever we went through, and we graduated to show you little people that it can be done with all that diversity, all that racism. When I walk in my class in my first day of school and somebody calls me a barbarian, I took it very personal. It's like, no, I didn't grow up in Watts. My grandmother lived there and I wasn't a rider, but you just categorize a group of people. So all the more reason, Irvine students, if you're people of color and you get challenged, you accept that challenge. You learn and know that you can compete. You can compete with the best of them. Your brain is good. You're gonna be on that leading edge. I still get my, I don't tell nobody, I still get my UCI magazines, and I see the advances that they made in cancer and all that stuff, because that's another thing. Crystal, a year ago, this conversation would not have been happening because I had no voice, because I had stage 3 cancer of the larynx. So I am now in 1 year, 15-month remission.
It's wonderful.
So,
It's wonderful.
And I can talk.
Yes.
So when I look at that, I go, you Irvine. And we used to talk about those people with those glasses on over there in physical science. I said, you keep them glasses on and y'all keep pumping that cancer research, because it's you guys that are going to save the world. Also, I speak to the administration and the administrators. I hear you about scholarships and all that stuff for students. My question is, why does it cost so much to go there? When I was there, it was $200 a quarter. So my question is, what are they getting for their 10,000 or 20,000? What more are they learning that I didn't learn for 200? I'm really curious about that. I understand inflation, but also in physical science and physical, they tell me that probability and statistics, the numbers don't match. And so from 200 to whatever it is, those numbers need to come down so it can be more affordable, because people shouldn't be barred and having to make choices. Because right now, also look at that, we're a gladiator society. We will pay an athlete $250 million to go throw a stupid football. Will we pay a scientist at Irvine that to come up with the cure for cancer? I bet you if that amount of money was on the table for a student with the brain to come up with the cure for cancer and diseases, the schools would be flooded with applicants, just like they flooded with athletes. So for those in the administration, look at that. Look at those numbers and look at what we prioritize. Are you prioritizing a gladiator that can throw a football? Are you prioritizing a brain that can come up with a cure for cancer? My word to you students.
My last question, Joy, is, if you had to use 3 words to describe UCI, what would those 3 words be?
3 words?
Yep, 3 words.
Pretty cool times.
Pretty cool times.
Pretty
I love
cool
it.
times. When you look at it, because I'm like, I'm not gonna, you've made me look at my negativity and all those things I thought as negative experiences at Irvine. We're like, you know what? It's sometimes those weird things that make you be a better person and grow up to be the best you could be. Because had you not experienced it, you would not have the perspective that you have, the understanding that you have, and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, pretty cool time.
Joy, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, to hear more about your experiences. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wish you guys the best. This project is long overdue, and I can't wait to see the outcome. And I may send you some of my papers so you can laugh, because I still do have them.
I love that.